my friends, this is Paul, and tonight I'm going to be reviewing World's End Club for the Nintendo Switch. This is the latest game from Kotaro Uchikoshi, who directed and wrote the Zero Escape trilogy as well as AI The Somnium Files. Both series are some of the best stories I have ever read in any medium, possibly even better than that of Harry Potter, if I really want to think about it. And this guy is notorious for having some of the best stories in gaming, but in order for it to work as a game, he kind of has to shoehorn in gamey elements so that he doesn't just say, well, I could have just published it as a book. So it's something that only works in the artistic medium, blah, 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 blah. Well, unfortunately, that's pretty much the same case here. This is a wonderful story filled with several suspenseful moments and plenty of twists and turns that'll keep you guessing all the way through. I found that the ending was very satisfying. It was a lot quicker to get to than Uchikoshi's other games, which often involved a lot of quantum physics and keeping track of multiple story beats. This game is pretty easy to finish. If you're even somewhat good at platformers, you're probably going to get the definitive ending without even trying. 100%ing this game is really easy too. There are stickers to find in the levels, and there are 30 overall, and I got 26 on my first playthrough, and I'm not even a completionist. So completionists out there are going to find very minimal challenge in getting the Platinum Trophy, if the Switch were to have Platinum Trophies, that is. So the premise is that you're controlling a middle schooler named Rachel. He and his 11 friends have been captured and forced to play a game of fate in an underwater theme park. The objective of the game of fate is for one person and one person only to finish their task. However, no one knows what their actual task is because all of them are wearing bracelets that display someone else's task. So it's up to them to figure out how they're going to figure out which bracelet contains their task and how they're going to read it. And they only have an hour to do it, otherwise they're all going to die. So it's a very simple setup, and you might be thinking, dang, Paul, with this footage and what you're saying, you're spoiling an awful lot of the game. But honestly, I've hardly told you guys anything. There's so much to this game that I won't even be touching on in the footage at all. Just when you think this is over, Uchikoshi does it again and says, yeah, that was only like 2% of the actual narrative. There's still plenty more to go where this came from. So the gameplay is that you play a 2D platformer where you move from left to right. And you're tasked with very, very simple puzzle platforming skills. Occasionally there's combat, but most of the time the combat is really simple. It boils down to avoid the enemy's attacks, throw something at enemy, and then rinse and repeat. There are some special abilities you learn along the way, but for the most part the special abilities are a really mixed bag. Some of them have incredibly obnoxious starting animations that don't pause the movements of the enemies, and then by the time you're like, hurry up and do your move already, the enemies are going to kill you. Which really doesn't help because Rachel only has one hit point, so if you get hit by one thing, you have to start the segment over. Thankfully the checkpoints are pretty evenly spaced, so you usually don't have to repeat too much of what you already did. However, this game's controls are really awful. This game feels like it was made by someone who was learning how to make a video game in gaming school, but instead of going through and getting their degree, they kind of just said, I'm good enough, I'll just make a game from here. The physics just feel really off. A lot of the platforming segments feel so mind-numbingly simple, which isn't always a bad thing. A lot of the Mario games are really simple too. But the simplicity was also what made them fun. However, there's a lot of moments where you're just walking to the right with no challenge whatsoever, or the puzzle is as simple as push block, jump on block, jump over obstacle, or grab item, throw it at another item, and then the puzzle's over. Now, admittedly, this helps this have more of a pick-up and play nature, as it helps the checkpoints feel more spread apart. It allows you to sort of take your break and not feel like you're going through a huge platforming gauntlet like the likes of Celeste. However, if the controls were actually good, that would also help, as a lot of times Rachel will move too much when I want him to slow down, or he'll jump too far when I want him to correct his jump. And a lot of the times the hit detection is really awful, and sometimes you won't even know what you did wrong, and you'll have to sort of learn that you could mess up so that you could do it on a second try. Good game design should allow you to be able to finish a platforming section on your first try because you're given enough information to get past it by virtue of good game design, good camera, good environmental placement, a whole variety of mismatch of stuff. Thankfully, the story is so good that I would recommend pushing through these platforming segments and not even allowing them to bother you. Just say, you know what, the story is worth it, I'm just going to tolerate them. And a lot of times they're so short that you won't even have time to grumble very much. Now, the presentation honestly is a bit of a mixed bag. I appreciate how the characters are in the world, they're not just cardboard cutouts, and they do have expressions. Sometimes the animations can get over repeated, sometimes twice in the span of two characters saying, like, bless you, oh thank you. But overall, it's pretty harmless compared to some of the stuff we've seen in the Ace Attorney and the early Zero Escape games. The graphics are a nice mixture of 3D environments with two-dimensional characters in them. It kind of reminds me of a budget version of the new Tom and Jerry movie that just came out, where you've got animated animals alongside real humans and real backdrops. It has its pleasant moments. A lot of the backgrounds are really nice, but it also doesn't feel like a showstopper for the Switch. This feels like something that the 3DS could have run, not a problem. Speaking of running, the game for the most part runs okay. It's not a 60 frame per second masterpiece. It crashed on me once, and there were times where the AI would run in circles. There were times when the AI would get like stuck on the environment, or a character would just lamely drop off of a surface instead of having a proper falling animation. And it just felt like the game developers didn't know what they were doing as far as showing off animations. There are a couple of very impressive cutscenes, but there really aren't that many of them. In fact, one of them shows up within the first couple of minutes of starting up the game, and then from then on, everything just kind of takes a nosedive. However, what really excels is the voice acting and the music. Now, the voice acting, if you're playing it in the English dialect, it does take some getting used to, because these are middle schoolers, so most of the characters have really high-pitched, obnoxious voices. One character even talks like Princess Peach, if Princess Peach inhaled helium, if that's even possible to comprehend, and she got really grating on my eardrums. Thankfully, because the story doesn't take itself too seriously compared to the Zero Escape games, a lot of times the melodramatic voice acting can be forgiven, because you're like, yeah, okay. In anime-type, ridiculous scenarios, sometimes the actors do have to go a little bit over the top, but at least you can tell that they try to inflict emotion, as even when there's just ellipses on the screen, the actors will try to do the and pauses that apparently Japanese actors are so good at, and that's why a lot of people don't like the English voice acting. I, in particular, think the English voice acting is really great, especially the guy they cast for Aniki. He just nails every single line he does. So for the most part, it's pretty good. The music is kind of forgettable most of the time, but then they pull in some really impressive vocal numbers, and those are so impressive that I honestly wish I could just do an entire video just showing you guys the songs. But if I were to show you too many of them, that would be into major spoiler territory, as one of them is the credits theme. However, at the end of this video, I will show off one of the musical numbers. You might want to tune out once I say, hey guys, spoiler territory, so that you don't see a mild spoiler, but it doesn't really give away any story details. It just gives away one tiny little thing. So overall, I think that World's End Club was definitely worth the wait. I was mind blown by some of the twists in the game, and I really am excited to go back to the previous segments and replay a lot and realize, oh wow, that one little sentence there was a huge red herring, and this meant this, and it kind of just blows my mind also how the story can be so simple, and there's so little of it, but yet it still manages to pack such a huge punch, and only these guys from Zero Escape and Danganronpa, I feel it, could manage such a Herculean task and get so much with so little. So I definitely think it's worth checking out. However, if you're not a huge fan of poorly optimized gameplay and just a whole lot of really basic game design problems that weren't ironed out in the testing phase, you might want to consider renting this. I definitely don't think you should skip it, but I think you should rent it from Gamefly like I did. And if you like what you see, then I suggest you buy it, because the story really is that worth it, where you would want to replay the scenario and see what you were missing in the heat of the moment. However, if you're a fan of Zero Escape and Danganronpa and Ace Attorney and those kinds of visual novel games, this is probably a no-brainer buy. You probably already bought it and you're watching this review to see if the game is worth it, or you've already made up your mind, even with all the negative things I'm saying in this review, and you're gonna get it anyway. I definitely think it's worth a try. I think these guys should be supported. I definitely hope there is some kind of sequel to this, because I really like the premise and the environment and the characters. And overall, I just like the style on the Switch, and I hope that it continues. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if I left anything out in the comments section, or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or critiques. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and this is your cue to stop the video if you don't want a mild spoiler. Bye!
Summer days, we have to find the courage within for whatever comes our way. Our great adventure's about to begin. For boys and girls, go, go, go getters, fate brought us together. And when we all work as one, we're the toughest